Hello, hello, good evening, everyone. John Henry Soda here. Welcome to Music Makers with JHS. That's me. And Break Time. And that is these guys.
Woo!
What's up,
Yeah.
guys? So now
Hey,
LinkedIn is not letting me go live. Oh, damn
wow.
it.
Linked out.
Yeah,
Get it?
I
He
get it.
got he got linked out.
Dun-dun-dun.
When Joey gets here, he'll go, but I'm for us.
Dun-dun. All right, guys. So we had somebody suggest that we did a show focusing on decades. Now, decades starting in the 20s, because I think earlier before that, I mean, I'm sure you can go there, and it's you can go back as far as man can remember man. But I think that the 20s is really when music really kind of took really just exploded. I think also the recorder, people were recording more and realizing that technology was something to was able to document these masterpieces and these part of history. So I think the 20s is a good place to start. Now, obviously, we're none of us. Well, I mean, my grandma was born around that time, so this was a long time ago. Um, yeah, my grandma. You know when my grandmother was born? My grandmother was born in 1911.
Oh,
The Titanic sank in 1912.
yeah.
Isn't that crazy? And we didn't have like flight. I was like, how the hell did that happen? And here's Mr. Joey.
Hey,
Joey,
that's our time.
how are you?
Joey. What's up?
You made it. We're almost done, actually. Want to thank everybody for tuning
Yeah,
in.
thank you.
Yeah, round of applause for Joey.
You can buy my autobiography. You know the deal.
Right. So we're talking about the 20s today, and it was a suggestion. I don't know if it was it Joey or Andres. I don't know who had the idea of doing decades.
I think Joey.
That was kind of me. Yeah.
Kind of you. You don't want to
It
blame
was
for it.
kind of me.
It was kind of
Oh,
me.
so
Kind of me. Like
I was just winging it that day when they came up
the
with
other half
that
of
one.
me was like, yeah, sure.
It's
Why
a
don't we
great-
do decades?
The other half of me was going like this.
Yes.
But it is
Bang.
a great idea for shows, because I think that it being musicians, you want to be able to kind of know music, not just like be like, I only like music, I only like Beyonce or whatever. You want to be able to, as a musician, you should explore music all the way as far as you can possibly get, and embrace it, because it's part of what we're currently doing. So I'm not gonna start. I'm gonna have one of you guys start, and Sean, I'm gonna have you um, pick who you want to start, just to kind of change it up a little bit.
All right. So
All right.
I think to truly understand the zeitgeist of the 20s, we need to
Yeah, I wonder who that can be.
we need to understand the culture of
The culture was
what
like
made the 20s so roaring. So how about we go to Joey?
All right.
Ooh.
Applause for Joey.
ladies and
Applause for
gentlemen.
Joey.
Thank you. I'm here all night. So, I think so. The 20s emerged mainly from the aftermath of World War One, and luckily I know a lot about this. Like I'm like a World War One like like not fanatic, you should say, because like it's kind of the wrong word, but like you know what I mean. Like I'm like into
Sure.
it.
I mean, fanatic is the word fan, so
Yeah,
it just comes
yeah.
from, so it's not
Not
kind
of
of
like
bad.
what
It's just that
happened
they're
in World War One, just like of the interesting aspects of it. Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
He doesn't
Not-
support it, but he knows
Yeah,
about it.
nah, just interesting. It's always intrigued me. But yeah. So I think during the Roaring 20s, that's when the U.S. had like the booming economy. Like businesses were booming. The trade surplus was high, and that's coming all from Europe, who's mainly trying to recover, and all the countries who are trying to, especially England and Germany, who are trying to get back into their normal routine, as should say, like they're trying to restock on their supplies and rebuild their economies, basically, because after World War One, like it was a total shit fest. Excuse
I know,
my
yeah.
French. Yeah, but The U.S. was the only country that was one of the few countries that was booming because most of the countries were turning to the U.S. for stuff, and they were making a lot of profits off of it. And so
Wow,
because of that,
actually made in the USA.
yes, yes,
Nice.
and and yeah, because of that, yeah, everyone's morals were high, and just the culture of the 1920s was it was a culture of very optimistic times. People's morals were high, as I said. Also, I think the big band movement started during that time. There was the rise of the big bands. They weren't like popular yet until like the 30s, but they did start around like the 20s. And I believe Ella Fitzgerald was popular during that time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, that's when they were in like the pop scene. Like the pop scene of the 20s was the big band music, and everyone was sight reading. That was the big thing. If you could sight read back then, that was you were hired for everything. And I believe if I can remember, that was when like the recorded like the microphones and stuff like that was when it all like came into popularity.
Yeah,
So,
actually,
electrical
vinyl
recording
and stuff.
yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that's it for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that was definitely a booming time, and it's funny, just going back to like the fact that it was booming because so much production was happening in America. We were making stuff and sending it out, and so of course people are joyous. I mean, the mafia was thriving also, or it was like everybody was just thriving, right? Um, and I think also the morale, it's in the music. You can feel the morale of the country in a lot of these songs. They're just fun songs. Especially the person that I'm going to talk about is Cab Calloway, and if you listen to his stuff, and as well as like Louis Armstrong and those guys, they really kind of had this joyous, we're in America, we're where there's still segregation was really at its, we're still really, really high, but there were places for them to be. There were these venues where you can, even if you had to go in through the back, you can perform at some of the biggest clubs anywhere, and that was okay. I mean, yes, they had these stupid things, but it was really a wonderful time for music and just for the creativity of to document the positivity that was going on in the country.
Yeah.
That was really what was so important, and why this is such a historical. Those are like historical documents. Like in the film. What's that film no, stupid. Space Quest or whatever it's called. Galaxy
John.
Quest. Galaxy Quest. Yeah. I don't know if you guys watch Galaxy Quest, but never mind. So anyway, these historical records are just so great for that time. What were you saying, Sean?
Yeah, John, if I may bounce off of what Joey said, yeah, the morale would be high if we were in the middle of our second industrial revolution in our country. There was like you said, mass production of goods. Electricity was really allowing us to pump more goods out. There was mass marketing. Employment was at all-time highs, and credit was introduced. Credit cards of today, back then, the idea was for you to live the American ideal, you need to spend your money as a consumer on all this good stuff out there to power that economy and to live your life the American way. Obviously, that backfired in the 30s, but since we're happy and roaring right now, let's stay in the 20s.
We'll get to that next week.
Yeah. And
Next week.
and spoiler alert. And as you said, there was still segregation, but progress was being made, as you said as well. New Orleans, the music of New Orleans was becoming more popular.
Mm-hmm.
There was a renaissance in Harlem going on as well.
Oof, Cotton Club.
Our elections, there was a new change in the 1920 election. Women were granted the right to vote,
Suffrage.
and that really kicked off 10 years of, well, 12 years of laissez-faire capitalism and conservatism, also known as the three boring presidents: Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and
Right.
Herbert Hoover. But and to cap it off, the American economy grew 42%, so almost like half of
Almost double, yeah.
it was almost by it was almost by half that the American economy grew in 10 years, and it was amazing. And thinking, ahead 100 years, it's really, there's a lot of correlation going on with some of the policies today that have been put in place and the market boom that did occur before the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah, because that was the because that's what worked. It's already documented that making stuff here and selling it, good quality stuff
Yeah.
here, it just works. I mean, that's not I don't know why that's like difficult for anybody to understand, but that is the way it is. And also, we had very powerful families back then. You had the Carnegie, which was he had more. I think it was it was Carnegie. Yeah, he had more money at one time than the government.
Mhm.
Like he had more money than the government. Like he had to lend money once to the government for some stuff. And
Yeah.
so of course, you get these families, Carnegie, Rockefellers, and Rothschilds, and all these
Rothschilds. And-
these families that got together.
And now they're joined by the Windsors.
Right, exactly. And so they have all these all this stuff that they did with the government. So of course, to pay them back, and we're not going to go into that kind of history, but to pay them back and to do it, they came up with some really interesting regulations, including the whole banking industry and that whole thing. So the times were, it was sort of like, it was just fantastic because everybody was working. There was money, people were partying. It seemed like a utopia when you think about it. When you read books from that era, which I've read quite a few, you realize, I read a lot of the Groucho, the Marx Brothers books and stuff, and they were around during that time. And yes, there was a poverty. There were areas, Lower East Side and even even Upper East Side was a tremendous, very poor neighborhood. But they all had food and there was music. Like music was like such an important part of like everyone's life, like everyone listened to music. And in the radio, everyone sat around the radio and listened to the big bands playing and all the TV shows, the Bob Hopes, and all the, even earlier before that, gosh, who was, well, the Marx Brothers, and Abbott and Costello, and all those guys that were on the radio. And then of course all the bands, the musicians. So yeah, good stuff, man. Who's next?
All right.
Eeny, meeny, miny, moe, buddy.
Eeny, meeny, miny, Andres. To take us into, I guess, give us some context into the technology aspect of things, of what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the fact that we had things like radio, making music available all across the country was just an insane boost in the amount of people getting inspired to play instruments, or the amount of people that are getting inspired to write music. And I think that really fast forwarded the whole evolutionary process of music. Like, if you listen to music from 1750 and you listen to music from 1690, it sounds so similar in some ways. Like, yeah, it's the Baroque period and the Renaissance, and it's not too different, or the Romantic, not Renaissance. It's not too different, but it's also very similar. But like when you listen to music from, say from 1920, and then 10 years of that, by the 30s and the 40s, the music's changed entirely almost.
It really has.
And because not only was it big band swing that was really popular, but rock and not blues, blues was also, that's when it was probably at one of its peaks in history. And that, as we all know, like blues is what led to rock and roll. I think if it wasn't for the fact that we were
Led to us.
yeah, that's us. I think if it's for the fact that if that music wasn't being played on the radio and being heard around the country, Elvis probably wouldn't have been inspired to shake his hips on stage, or things like that. And then not only that, but the video recordings, which was like insane. I was watching just these videos of Louis Armstrong, and I could imagine at the time it probably wasn't such a huge deal, but now looking back and realizing the impact that Louis Armstrong had,
Oh man.
it almost seems like a mythical character, and the fact that you could watch this person on stage, just amazing.
Yeah.
So I could also see like as another clarinetist, Sidney Bechet. He was another really big one from the New Orleans scene at the time, and yeah, I mean when you got these people on camera and on the radio doing like pushing the boundaries with their with the jazz, with the improvisation, that's just like a catalyst for music taking a big leap forward. So I think that's really a huge deal when it comes to the importance of the 20s and how much they changed the trajectory of music.
Yeah, Andres, did you know that you talked about a very important effect of the radio, like you said, the evolutionary aspect of music was really hastened with the introduction of the radio, but it also really made what we know now as celebrity.
Yeah.
These people got big names, and now you got these bands out there with the front man. Now there's the idea of the front man, and they have their name on the band, like the first crooners like Rudy Valley and Bing Crosby, and the Count Basie Orchestra, Duke Ellington, people in that vein, really, and not only in music, but everybody knew about like Babe Ruth, or like on political campaigns, there were now ad blitzes over the radio in political campaigns. So it really advanced a lot of like the culture into what we know it now as today and what we're living.
Yeah. And you really also have to see how important it is that was documented. Like Andre said, like how amazing it is that the creation really of a genre is documented, being created, developed, because it was like not there, and then suddenly jazz, and it's like you see the birth of it, and it's documented, documented on video, documented on vinyl, forever. And I don't think in the history, because by the time rock and roll came out, we already had television, and we saw Elvis shaking it and all that stuff. It was kind of like already we knew we were going to be documenting what came forward, but at that point we just didn't know. You know what I mean? We had no idea, and I don't think really, since that was probably the most important documentation of a period of time in our culture, where music, you can see music birth, and nothing else. I don't think, and I'm talking about anything else in general, not just music, but like film, for instance. We had the silent films, and we had Charlie Chaplin, Star, and
Nosferatu.
What was that?
Nosferatu, the vampire movie.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with Max Schreck.
Yeah, you're going way back now. So and Birth of a Nation, which is a horrible film, but it was like a film made that also documented a period of time. You know what I mean? But it documented kind of a dark period of time. It wasn't necessarily a joyous occasion. And there's a lot of those films that came from that era that documented that particular time, but it didn't really document a birth of something. It was like we already knew racism. We already knew there were these lynch mobs and these horrible things going on in the world. But this music was not there during that time. It was there for us to see and to document it. And then it kind of like Andre said, then it kind of developed into something else. Then the 40s came, and the 30s and the 40s. I guess the 30s, it was still kind of like kind of still developing. But then once Sinatra came in and he took the big band and he turned it into this incredible whole piece. And then you had people like Count Basie and what's the sax the clarinet player Tommy Tom can't remember his name legendary guy, but I'll remember his name at some point. But all these guys came out and they started leading their bands. Tommy Dorsey, so the Tommy Dorsey band and a couple other guys that I can't think of right now. But all these bands took that stuff from the
The
20s.
Dave Brubeck Trio.
That's right. And then they kind of came and then the 40s and the 50s, and then by the time rock and roll came along, it was just, wow, But to see that it start there with Louis Armstrong and these guys was pretty amazing. Who's next, Tommy?
Tommy.
Tommy.
I mean, who else would it be? The
Yeah,
Pizza
thoughts
Man?
on the 20s. And you got some song picks for us too?
Oh boy, do I! Yeah. So, out of the 1920s, of course, talking about the music aspect of it, some of the biggest, I don't know, like with some of them, I would say songs, because there was one in particular to start off with that it's more of a piece of music, and it's called Rhapsody in Blue.
Oh yeah,
George Gershwin.
A standard, I guess you could say by this point. But I remember hearing it in first time I ever heard it was, I believe, Fantasia 2000 from Disney. I think they had like that song included in that. And I'm not gonna lie, I did dig it, growing up, listening to it through that movie, because it was just so, how do we say, complex, like everything that was going on in that song.
Yeah, the movie too.
But it was just like one of the, it's become one of the most famous pieces of music throughout history, like, which came out of the 20s, ironically enough. So, and another one, musical number from a movie that came out in, I believe, the 1950s, Singing in the Rain. Came out of the original version of that. Came out in the 1920s, of course. The original version. I forget who does it originally, though, offhand, but it wasn't whoever sang it in the film. It was somebody else. But that song, I was very familiar with that one, because I think a lot of other movies later on kind of ripped that scene off where he's like running around in the rain and dancing around the pole with his umbrella and stuff. I feel like everybody's ripped that off at some point, somewhere.
Yeah.
I remember a more PG-14 version of that. That's a camp song we sing when we're out in the woods.
Oh
boy.
That's like one of my favorite films, Singing in the Rain, with the one with Gene Kelly. And I think that's such a great all around film with just humor, some of the greatest songs ever. And, the dancing is amazing. I mean, the film itself is just really holds up. I've actually played it for my daughter, and she loves it. She'll sometimes just play the funny scene when that, the one with the voice that she talked like this, but she's got all the beautiful singing voices in the movies, because it's a period piece, right? So even though it was shot in the 50s, it's really about the 20s. The whole film takes place in the 20s. And when you had these wonderful stars, Rudy Valentino actually, and all these guys, they were really amazing on camera and they looked fantastic, but their voices sounded terrible. So they'd be like, "Hello, my dear, how are you?" And it'd be like, all right, that ain't gonna work. So they had to get people to overdub the voices, and this was like a job. People with beautiful singing voices, men and women, would just go in and overdub the speaking voices on some of these films. So so that funny scene where she's like singing, she's lip syncing, and then they open the curtain and she's in the back kind of singing and everybody laughs. Anyway, it's a funny classic film. But yeah, that's a great song, and that's a great pick. And I totally forgot it. You're right, it's 20s. It was like, because I'm so stuck to it being in the 50s
That's
So
what I
that's when
thought it was
Gene
from
Kelly
too. I
did it.
thought it was like 50s, but I found out it was
Yeah,
1920s. I was like, wow, it's an old song then.
yeah, it's really old song. It's such a good song too. It's such a catchy song.
Singing in the rain.
Yeah, I think melody really also was sing it, Tommy. I think melody. Where's your umbrella?
Play it, Tommy.
And rain. It's raining out. Why don't you go out?
Well, it was
Uh,
raining earlier today. It's ironic
Yeah.
enough.
It was. So I think that's one of those finds that people don't realize. That the history
Yeah.
of that. And I think that's why it's good that we're doing this, because I think we kind of learn and we're like, oh yeah, forgot about that. It's a pretty cool thing. So Sean, you want to go next?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna try and wrap everything that these guys have said together into one coherent piece.
Wow.
Get ready,
All
folks.
right.
Grab your popcorn and sodas because it's gonna be a while.
Yep. It'll also be
So-
in the biography.
Go ahead, Sean. Yeah.
All right, synopsis time. So the 1920s, Joey, you attacked the cultural aspect. So
And some big
Yes.
band stuff.
and some big band stuff. Yeah, and you said the 1920s, they were reflective of the optimism of America moving on from the atrocities that happened in World War One, and not only World War One, but the Spanish flu was happening at the same time.
That's right.
Killing over 50 million people to the 38 million people that died in World War One.
Gosh,
So
where was Bill Gates back then, man?
where
We
was-
really needed him. We really needed
Oh,
him and his. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
and yeah, the 20s were roaring. Laissez-faire capitalism of three boring presidents, all conservatives: Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover. Second
Hoover.
Industrial Revolution in the United States, definitely we felt its effect in the musical realm, especially in not only recording, but in the dissemination of music, like Andre said, with the radio. Did you know that the first commercial radio station was made? It was founded in 1920. It was founded right before Election Day of 1920 on November 2nd, KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it reported the election results. That was the first broadcast, but it became a forerunner for what we know as the music radio stations today,
Wow.
really. By 1926, the FCC reported that 4.5 million radio sets all throughout the United States, were in use. Luxury became common, as is the flow of, new products. Luxury became common. There was a new large listening audience, created celebrities,
Yep.
like Bing Crosby, Rudy Valley, Frank Sinatra, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Jelly Roll Morton. All these guys playing these songs in this new upbeat way, from jazz to blues to publicizing traveling dance bands and playing Broadway shows over the radio. Electrical recording phased out acoustic recording. People had to stand in specific places when they were recording to really emphasize certain parts of the mix, because you couldn't control the mix any other way.
There was no mixing
There was no
board.
mix. Yeah, you had a singer standing right in front of a horn, singing straight into a horn. But
Yeah,
now,
Pro Tools wasn't out. Pro Tools was like maybe a little later.
that was the Pro Tools of the 20s.
Right.
But electrical recording, amplifiers as we know them and microphones as we know them, without them, there wouldn't be a front man. And what would popular music, be today? We wouldn't have had the Beatles if we didn't have amplifiers. We wouldn't have had the Beatles if we didn't have microphones. We wouldn't have concerts as we know today. Well, depending on when live music comes back, but concerts as we knew them before COVID-19. But there's also a downside to it. Tin Pan Alley, as it were. Sheet music, they both came to a downturn because there was such a demand for this new music. And Tin Pan Alley couldn't satisfy that demand on its own. Radio lessened the value of sheet music because why do I need to learn how to play it myself if I can listen to somebody else play it for me on the radio? Convenience. And now we get to the fun part, the artists that became celebrities because of all these technological advancements. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Fats Waller, the Empress of the Blues, Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, Jelly Roll Morton, Paul Whiteman and his dance band, Ben Burney, Broadway's Eddie Cantor, Fanny Brice, crooners, Rudy Valley, Bing Crosby, and then later on, you'd see singers like Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra, and again, it's because of this booming economy that this really happened, and the positive outlook created by that economy. An economy affects everything in a country, including the arts. There was a cultural boom with the economic boom, and the influence can still be felt today. They go to the creative output of artists, not only in our favorite decades of like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but just how we go about life today. And we could see parallels, when it comes to the culture, when it comes to the economy, and when it comes to public health, a century later, we're still feeling the effects of this decade, and it really was a turning point in our society.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Sean. Definitely covered a lot there, and I think you're right about the morale, because I think when the economy is going really, really strong, people just don't have that one thing looming over their heads. Am I going to eat? Am I secured? Do I have all these things? And but again, you also had a different time when people can just grab their instruments and kind of just head out and go perform. It wasn't. We don't. Unfortunately,
that was
New
the
York
prime back
City.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, like New York City is not friendly that way, unless you're gonna just busk or something and go to the subway, which is fine too. There's some great musicians down there that I've seen throughout the years, but back in it was just a different and it gave you that confidence because things were going well. You can go out, and you know why? Because you're gonna play. You know why you're gonna play? Because there are a lot of people out there that want to hear. A lot of people are out there are happy. They want to hear. They want to see the musicians come in.
The industrialization, created all these new products and made everybody's life easier. And when you have less time, when you have more time to do nothing, what are you going to do? You're going to occupy your time with the arts.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you're right. It is kind of like a double-edged sword, because then people stopped, I guess, learning. Sheet music was like a big deal, right? You had to go out and buy sheet music, and that was like the musicians spend their money to get charts. And if you were a musician that had charts already, and you had, you were valuable just for the fact that you have all these charts. You know what I mean? It's like you come to the table with like wealth, so that was like a big deal. The fact that went down, it brought the value down, and so it was a little bit of a downside. But I think that overall it brought music out more. It actually did expose people to this music, and as a result, more younger people were like, whoa, what is that? I want to do that, and that came as a result of it playing on the radio. So I think it's
great point
sort
by
of
Andres.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's mainly it's,
Joey with the big bands, Tommy with the cool song picks.
it's a more of a win than a loss for sure. The fact that it was a small price to pay, I guess. But the guy that I wanted to talk about was I wanted to talk about Cab Calloway, who's like one of my favorite artists just of all time. Because when you think about Elvis and you think about all these James Brown and Michael Jackson, and you think of all these, this guy was doing it way before them. I mean, this guy's present on stage, his voice, his confidence, his phrasing, um, was the way he dressed, the way he commanded the stage and the band. It was rock and roll. It was rock and roll. There was no rock and roll, but he was kind of like, for me, like the first real rock star. And he created so much. He wrote a book in I think it was in 1944. It was an actual book on the different dialect that they used back then. It was like whatever the hipsters called it. And I think I wrote it down somewhere. I don't remember if I did or not, but I can't remember. But it was like a dictionary basically that had all the hipster words like in the groove. Like now we listen to that and it's like, well, yeah, of course that makes total sense. It's in the groove. But back then that was like a really a new thing. There were, let me see if I have some notes here. I know I wrote stuff down, but I remember most of this stuff. So anyway, he was also one of the first people to sell like 1 million records. Like 1 million records. I mean, he met what's his name, Louis Armstrong, right? He met Louis Armstrong in some club somewhere. I think it was called Chicago Sunset Club, and he met Louis Armstrong, and Louis Armstrong basically taught him how to do the scat singing and stuff like that. And scat singing is sort of like whatever and what he the main reason that they did that was because they wanted to come up with melodies for songs. It wasn't the fact that they just wanted to go skip, but they wanted to put something in its place to then later on come back and put some. This is why the development of it is so amazing to me, and it's documented. They weren't just going like scoop. They weren't just doing that for no reason. Yeah, it was because they would sit there and they would play and they'll be like, how about this? And then they'll put lyrics in there. But if the lyrics didn't fit, they'll have a whole section where they just go skip, but that's how a lot of those songs were written, Minnie the Moocher and all those classic songs from Cab Calloway were a result of meeting in 1928, meeting Louis Armstrong and Louis teaching him that, and he went off and he had a number one hit across the country in like 1931, and I think in 1928 he put a band together, and then in 31 he had that huge hit, and so like 1 million records, like that was unheard of. So here's another element that happened. People started realizing, oh wait a minute, there's money here, and of course as soon as somebody realizes there's money involved in an artist, you got the talk about Minnie the Moochers. Well, here come the Moochers that have no talent.
I like
and have
money.
yeah, they immediately saw that, and that's what really, you talk about making superstars. That's really what did it. It was the music started it, but it was the fact that the all eyes were on this $1 million sales, and then Louis Armstrong right behind them doing $1 million as well. I mean, Louis Armstrong was far a higher, bigger artist than Cab Calloway, but Cab Calloway was like this persona superstar. Like Louis Armstrong would go on stage and he would be with his trumpet and his scarf, and he would sing and he'd be fantastic. But this guy would go on stage and do all these dances, and he would get the audience involved. Get the audience all involved, and that became such a popular thing that the investors came in and were like, yeah, that guy came over and he was like, hey, I can make you guys more money because I don't know what the hell he was gonna do, but that's when people started getting record deals, because there was no record deal before. It was like, hey, this guy over there, he presses records. He's got a machine and you can press a record. Yeah, let's go press 40 records and sell them all for like 10 cents a pop. They would sell them at the shows, and that's what they would do, and that's how they made their money. They would press records. But then somebody said, I'm going to buy a press machine. I'm going to press all the records for you. And all you got to do is pay me this amount. And then,
Mhm.
Lord and behold, the record deal was born. And I
Phone
don't,
pluggers.
yeah, I don't know if it was a bad thing. And I don't know. I'll take, you guys' viewpoints on that. I don't know if it was a bad thing because I think if you didn't have those guys in the beginning, and if you look in history, there were guys that were really passionate about the music. And I'm talking about white men that had money and were really passionate about the music and really believed that there was something there that needs to be communicated. I saw a couple of documentaries, and it just hit me right now that I should have checked out one documentary, but it talked about one guy who in particular really fell in love with like this whole style of music, and he invested like most of his money on a record deal on a record company that people were like, are you insane? You're gonna actually put all your money into trying to sell black music? Like that was like the what people were telling him. And he was like, I am, and he did, and he obviously gave us some of the greatest artists of all time back in those days. I'm gonna find the documentary. I think next week I'll talk about him because it's still relevant in the 30s as well. So I think Cab Calloway for me was like, um, he also did something that I thought was different that I hadn't seen. I don't know that many people. He included his whole band in a lot of these tracks, just yelling in the back. So, like there was conversation. I don't know if you heard like stuff like that.
Howdy, 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 ho.
But there's also like Reefer Man. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Reefer Man. So it's a really popular song. It's
Heard of
basically
and
they're basically
jive.
talking about, hey, you heard of Reefer Man? Yeah, I heard of Reefer Man. And they're all having this conversation up on stage and stuff. And then this song starts, a classic song. And there's another one called something Jive.
There's the jump and jive, Joe Jackson.
Jump and Dive, and yeah, so all these songs he really incorporated. It was really a band, even though he was the guy up front, but he knew he needed that band. And even in his later years, he appeared on Broadway a bunch of times. In like 1969, he appeared on Broadway. He also appeared. He was in Hello Dolly. He was like one of the first black men on Broadway to play an actual lead role for Hello. It was actually an all black cast, but they did the whole thing, and it was on Broadway. And what else can I say about him? But I mean, he was in the Blues Brothers movie, and it was one of his last performances, his last performance where he put on the white suit, got up on stage, and did Minnie the Moocher and stuff, and
Mhm.
that's documented. And he was already pretty up there. He was probably close to he was probably in the 70s or close to 80s, and he died. He wasn't. I mean, he was 84 years old, I think, when he died, like in 1994, and he had received the from Bill Clinton. He received like the highest honor that you can get, the highest medal you can get for arts. Um, and in 1993, and then a year later he passed. But yeah, for me, this guy was a major foundation to all those guys, and he actually also paid extremely well. The only person that paid better than him was Count Basie, and Count Basie had an audience. But so the pay system, people wanted to work for these guys, because it was like they were paying real money. So yeah, that's my guy. So I don't know, what do you guys think about the recording contract or recording in the 20s? Like, do you think that was something that well, you already heard my viewpoint.
All right, who wants to take it first?
Joey. I just nominated him. By the way, Joey,
Back around the wheel again.
you ever heard of Cozy Cole?
Cozy Cole, nah.
Yeah, one of the greatest drummers back from the 20s. You gotta
Cozy Cole.
check him out. He played with Cab Calloway.
Cab Calloway?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I
I'll see if I
think,
find
Wow.
I think it was around the time with who was that first drummer? I think it was Fat something. He was like the one that created the drum set, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like it was like instead of I think instead of a bass drum though, like he had like a little bell instead that he would like put the pedal on and hit it. But like the bass drum would like kind of be to the side, and then like he would
Wow.
have like a snare. But I forget the name. I'll have to look it up. But
Yeah.
so you were asking about like recording stuff back then?
Yeah, I mean, like, what did
Yeah,
you
like
think?
the record deal, as it
The
were.
record deal thing. I mean, 'cause that's basically when somebody said, "Hey, money."
Oh yeah, I think if anyone got a record deal back then, I think it was like a really big deal. Like they already made it, you know. I mean, I may be wrong, but that was a time when like I think musicians were at their richest also, and they were making the most money. Also because of the booming economy, as like I've said before. But
Yeah, that definitely had a lot to do with it.
yeah, mainly yeah. Like once I believe was vinyl out back then. No,
I had the phonographs.
I think it was
Was what
mainly
out?
like vinyl. No, that
Oh
came
yeah,
out late.
well, no, I mean,
Vinyl came out
they're-
later, I think.
Yeah, I mean, their
Yeah.
recording that we have of Robert
So-
Johnson, you know,
Yeah,
They were like-
1931 RCA Victor,
1931.
the first commercially available vinyl long play.
Okay, so yeah,
Vinyl.
that was in the 30s. So I
commercially
guess
available. Yeah,
yeah,
Save
so I
that for
guess in the
next week.
20s, yeah, I guess their main source of
Spoiler.
streaming was through the radio and phonographs and stuff and listening like live basically. And like everything
and
was a live.
Spotify.
Everything
they
was
had
a live
Spotify.
performance back then. Yeah. Like,
They had the
now
roaring
we're, like,
Spotify.
Yeah. Exactly. And like everything was a live performance back then. Like it's not like now where like you could just, you know, like instantly record and then that's it. And then it's like pre-record
Right.
line up stuff. Like nah, it had to be like legit.
It had
But,
to be. Yeah, that's
yeah,
why those records were so amazing.
yeah, yeah. And like they just have that dirt to them. Like it, you know,
Mhm.
like I wish I knew more about them, but for what I know, like the really dirt sounding, it's what gives it that character, you know.
Yeah, I
And
love
just
it.
like
I love that early
And-
analog sound.
and most of the
Mhm.
most of like the way that they drove the time, it was very like on top of the beat, like, you know, and it really expressed like the culture of the time too, because people were
Right,
happy,
it was
people
fast
wanted
and it
to
was-
dance, and
yeah,
people
everything
loved like
was on the
fast
beat.
music. Everything was like on top. It was like driving.
Ain't
But,
no thing if it ain't got that swing.
Yes,
That's
exactly. But yeah, that's my
Right there, Cozy
Hey.
Cole.
nice. Oh, it looks a bit like Elvin.
Yeah.
A little bit. Let me see. I need to find the name of that drummer.
Yeah. So
I thought it
I'll
was,
take the.
I thought it was Michael Jordan. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. So to answer your question, John, you know, for all arts, the fact is patronage is really what brought the arts forward. And
Mhm.
you know, the fact that people who had more capital than other people, you know, were obviously they were looking out for their own profits, but they were willing to offer a chunk of it to these artists so they could encourage that economic activity and build these people up. You know, they did, most of them did earn it. Some people, they had more looks, you know, but most people, you know, as Joey said, musicians were really musicians in that time. You know, you really made yourself into, you know, into that reputation, you know, playing live, and that was really the only way.
You
So
had such a high level of people to choose from too. You know, like everyone you can choose from is just extremely talented because that's all they did. I mean, the ones that were out there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like they
yeah,
were like it's like not to knock any of the artists today, but you know, you'll get, I don't know, one great band for every, I don't know, 2,000 bands. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And there's like one band that just like, whoa, you know what I mean? And but back then it seemed like they were just, I mean, how can you have Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, you know, I mean, you know, these guys all playing like within days of each other at different clubs, you know, like the Cotton Club and stuff, and
And-
just ridiculous. Ella
Yeah.
Fitzgerald and all those guys.
the fact that there were people, you know, willing to engage in patronage as they saw it at the time with these record deals, furthered the art. Obviously, it there were more fairer deals than others, and there were more people who benefited than others. But that's just the nature of the beast. Life isn't fair. But the art, was it progressed. Through the capital that these people had.
Right, and it was the purity of it too that was captured during that time, and I think that's why probably a lot of those guys didn't really get the best deals because they didn't really care that much. They were doing it because they loved it so much, and they were developing something that had not been developed before. They didn't really know what they were developing. They were doing this thing, turned into this amazing thing. So I think that the purity of it was really so innocent that it was easy to, and I think that happens to a lot of artists. They're just so innocent. They just want to play their music. Somebody comes along and gives them a great story. We're going to take good care of you. And, a lot of them do it, but there's always that one horror story that you hear where somebody gets home and from a long tour of selling 10 million records, and they have, $50,000 in the bank to their name, and they're done, and so those kind of things are tragic. But I think that the purity of it is really what drives the artist. And I think for stuff like this that we're doing, it's important because I think it teaches you guys, obviously, because you guys are at the beginning of your career. So it's like you guys to make sure that you pay attention, right? And you guys also to talk to other people and say, yeah, listen, pay attention. You're going to meet a lot of bands, and it's okay to tell somebody, yo, if if somebody says, hey man, we're getting a deal, or really with who, with this company, this guy, he's got this big mansion, so he's giving us all this money. Well,
Yeah. Where do you see that mansion on Instagram?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it goes back to something that my guy at Blue Dog Music, Paul John Addy, said to me, and that is, you really need to be a good guy to everybody that you meet. You have to be good to everybody. Even if they treat you like crap, you got to be nice to them. Don't get walked over, but be nice, because the nice people, more times than not, they have more time at the top than people who are, for lack of a better word, assholes.
Right.
They go, they tank quicker than anybody else.
Oh yeah.
So you gotta be nice. And Andres, say somebody comes to you with a rosy deal to record some originals, and get Andres Ramirez out there. What do you do?
Whew, yeah, man, sounds good to me.
you gotta read the fine print there, bro.
Hey,
he's just like, where do I sign?
where do I sign?
I
Yeah,
get
definitely,
it.
you have to always think
is
of a grain of salt. And
Look at me signing my life away.
That's a perfect example of the purity of the 20s right there. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Andres.
well, geez, sir.
Now tell me, what would you do?
gotta- Well, like you said, first I'm gonna look over that contract to make sure it's good. Even though maybe I'd have to have my lawyer look at it. I don't know. I would probably look at it and try
Pay
to
for
read
that
the
lawyer,
fine
man.
print.
Pay for that lawyer.
Yeah,
Be a
nah,
good one.
you definitely don't want to look at when I was with the record label, the contract that we had was 91 pages. This is what they signed. They said we signed 2 artists, and they signed a 91 page. We knew what was in there because we had a lawyer, and the lawyer put in there what we wanted in there. Obviously, we weren't taking advantage of these guys because we wanted, but we also wanted to protect ourselves from an artist saying like, you know what, we really don't want to work with you anymore. It just doesn't work that way, right? It's like you can't just break off an agreement, and that's part of what happens with a lot of these contracts where you hear one side of the story. Yeah, because like let's just say you sign a band, right? The band is unknown, the manager is unknown, right? You sign a band, the band becomes the biggest thing on earth, right? A huge band is making millions and millions of dollars. the manager is making millions and millions of dollars too. And if one conversation of the manager continues to try to manage the band. So now Tommy is like one of the most famous guitar players. Andre is on the cover of all these magazines. Tommy, Joey, all you guys are doing amazing
Sean's on
things.
Songwriting Esquire.
Yeah, and your manager comes in and says, "Hey guys, I don't think we should do that European tour this year because I think what we should do is we should focus on a new album and then get ready for this thing." And you guys are like, "No, we want to go to Europe." You go, "No, I don't think you should." There's your first.
We worked this hard to get to touring Europe,
and then
and we get the opportunity, and then you take it from us.
You got to check that fine print because they could get you in like page 76.
Right.
Section 3
of 100 million.
This says here in our record contract, if you breach this contract, you're not getting paid here, and you can't compete with us for like 2 years or something.
You got to read every little detail.
Yeah, like right now,
I mean every detail.
Like Joey, you know as well as I do. You remember that in high school we were shown an example of what like a standard like record contract was.
Yeah.
And you had to fill it out yourself too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's one of the most.
That's what they'll show you in arts management too when you take that
Wow.
class.
Well,
they're
there
going
you
to
go.
tell you that also.
Yeah. So I think that it's important to like really have those conversations now, and just know what somebody's offering to you, because it always sounds good. You know what I mean? It's like, we're going to give you each $200,000 so you guys can not have to worry about, am I really giving somebody $200,000? No, we're not doing that. We're lending you $200,000. And then when you guys record a record, when you guys sell, what is it for, $800,000 worth of records, I get paid back fully. And then you start making some money. And how much money are you going to make? Probably like 7 cents per unit per deal.
You're going to make nothing.
And then how will you make ends meet? You'll have to.
Right. And then merchandise is another thing. If you don't have in the contract merchandise, the whole company could take it. That happened to I can't remember who it was, but the company took all their merchandise, so they were making no money off of their merchandise. And a lot of these bands in the early days, like AC/DC, like who hasn't seen an AC/DC T-shirt in their life? So can you imagine? Yeah, if they don't get one dime for that because their record company takes all of that money for all the merch. So you gotta cover your asses on the merch. You gotta cover your asses on appearances, personal appearances, radio appearances, concerts,
and the masters.
Venues.
You gotta have those rights to your masters. That's where you get your royalties.
And the masters.
And the publishing.
Masters. Yeah. So the contract is a big deal. And the fact that in the 20s, these guys were just like signing stuff and getting.
They didn't know any better.
Right. And remember, this was before record deals. Like you said, the first one was 1931. But that's the first one that was established, organized. You know what I mean? Before that, there were guys that were like, hey, I got money. I'm going to print up a little machine. How many can you print? I print 1,000. Print 1,000. We're going to sell them over there for like a penny. And I'm going to make, I'm going to make my money back, and I'll pay the guys a few bucks. Who's to know? I would love to find some of those original first prints. Can you imagine what those cost? So definitely something to consider when it comes to record deals and that time. But we are talking about the 20s, and
we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We're giving you a lot of spoilers. Whoever's still here, make sure you email johnhenrysoto@gmail.com for a cake from Judicki's with whatever message you want on it. You'll get somebody from BreakTime to deliver it to you in person, and you get a nice kiss on the cheek. Only if you're a girl.
And Sarah Smith, I'll have your cake. I did get your email again.
It feels like I know that person.
Yeah, I know, right? It feels almost real. So all right, guys. So let's wrap up with a couple of final words on why we're doing this and why we think it's important. Sean, you can actually speak for everyone. If anybody wants to say a few words, they can just raise your hand up while Sean is speaking.
I'll be the teacher. Okay, so I think this is very important to discuss. The past, as not to get political or anything, but obviously we're in a time where we're really um, we're taking everything into perspective about not only who we are as people, but who we are as a nation. In music, we have to appreciate the past, as it were, in order to in order to really progress the music, and really to see what made that music and what makes our music have its identity today. How did the progression of the music come to where we are today, and what aspects of that music and of the culture that inspired that music can we embody and can we put into our own identity, like as for BreakTime as a band, for example. Like the influences of the 20s, any decade really, but we're talking about the 20s. The influence of the 20s can be felt in the 60s. It's the Beatles, for example. This is the Beatles channel after all. Paul McCartney's dad was in a brass band. He learned his melodic tradition through his father, and he always had that affinity for, as John Lennon would say, granny music. But that there's so much greatness in everything, and taking the time to appreciate it really gives us the tools not to go back in time, but to further our society. So what do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, definitely looking
Yeah,
at the
basically
past
summed it up.
helps a lot when traversing the trails of today. Definitely have to look back to plan forward.
Yeah, you got to have context. How do we get here?
Yeah, I think
And-
that. Yeah, I think it's important that you guys are, doing things like this and really knowing where your your influences came from. You know what I mean? Like that really is a big factor, because that it just shows you how important and how far we have to go. Because really, when you think about the 20s, okay, 20s, but we think it's like, whoa, the 20s, you know what I mean? But it's not that. It's, we're talking at 100 years. In 100 years, look where we are. We're right now all in completely different places right now, having a conversation through this medium here, this technology. So it's advanced in 100 years pretty incredibly, and the future is going to be even greater on how people consume music. But the thing about how people consume music, somebody always has to create it. You know what I mean? Somebody has to sit down with their instrument and create something, and it's going to be inspired by something they heard. It's going to be inspired by
Yeah.
something they heard that
Art-
the person they
Art
heard
never
heard,
dies.
and it never. Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys about stuff like this, and seeing you guys have such a clear heads, and just real genuine interest in wanting to expand as musicians and as artists, and as a group, as a unit. I think that's very admirable, and I appreciate you guys for being on as always. So
And we appreciate you, John. Thank you for
I
having us
appreciate
on. And
Always.
as I always do,
Ah,
everything that we discussed in here will be published
Here
again
we go.
and put into the cultural zeitgeist
good night,
in
folks.
my autobiography. Yeah, yeah. Gotta swing it.
Bye.
2064.
All right, guys.
Hey, Tommy. Hey, Tommy.
Yeah.
Can you sit in one place and not have the audio crackle out? Thank you.
All right,
I'll-
guys.
I'll see you. Take care.
Have a great night. I'll see you
Stay
guys
healthy,
next
everybody.
Yeah.
Adios.
Adios.